Hi, it's Michael Kerr here, presenting Small Business Banter. A healthy micro and small business sector means a successful economy and a more vibrant society. Small Business Banter is about helping regional business owners better prepare for current challenges, but also for the next stage of business success. I'm Michael Kerr, founder of Kerr Capital, advisors to business owners. Each week, I interview a fellow small business owner or an expert, and they share their stories, their lived experiences, the wins and the losses, and their best advice to help you, the listener, get the most you can from your own business. Small Business Banter is brought to you from the studios of 104.7 Gippsland FM and is heard across Australia on the Community Radio Network. And thanks also to Kerr Capital, supporters of the show. Welcome to episode 2 in the Small Business Banter special summer series featuring interviews with regional business owners who have been through the process of selling their business. These owners will openly share their experiences for the benefit of other regional owners listening in who are thinking about selling, and also benefit, importantly, the communities that so heavily depend on these small businesses. Coming up shortly is the second and final part of my interview with Carolyn Fryer from Fish Creek in Victoria. It starts with her answering the question, what was the typical request she got from interested buyers who had asked for information to learn more about the business she was selling. And it concludes with a quick recap of the learnings or key takeaways from Carolyn's experience. If you want to listen back to the first part of the interview, or in fact any other episode, search up Small Business Banter in your favourite podcast catcher. Let's go to Carolyn now.
I don't think they had enough experience to even know what to ask, in actual fact. A lot of them, they didn't get to that point. And some of them I didn't push it because I could see they're probably on the wrong track. You know, they just, which was the problem with the people previously who really didn't get the business going. They just like a round peg in a square hole. You know, it just doesn't work. It's not going to work. It never will. They're wrong personalities or whatever, or they've got the wrong idea, you know. And some people came to me and they wanted to do toasted sandwiches and what have you, and out of there, well, we weren't into toasted sandwiches. There's other takeaway places there that they can get food from. We were more focused on the day-to-day needs and the, you know, groceries. etc. Yeah, we takeaway food might have been something they could add, but that wasn't what we were about. It's
So you figured if they can't get that sort of basic strategy right, there's probably a problem with them, or they'll discover sooner or later that at the expense of your time that this is not for them.
Yes, I think so.
Yeah. So with your, if you want to call it exit planning, what else did you do through the period from deciding to sell to actually selling? Did you change the way things were operating in the business, or did you add things?
Well, there wasn't much I could change, Michael. Look, I think the other thing that was very off-putting for people in that type of business is it's basically a 7-day business. Now, it wasn't a 7-day business when I went there. It was only a 5.5-day business. The other people didn't bother working at the weekends. Well, they sort of open till 12 o'clock on a Saturday, which is what happens a lot in the country too. But for that type of necessities of the kitchen and what have you, I decided I would stay open Saturday through till 5 o'clock initially, and the winter maybe to 4 o'clock, and I was open on Sundays. They had to be open. Well, ideally you have to be open for 7 days a week because you have a Newsagency license, but they were, I think, just pushing the papers down to the local servo and getting them to sell them. So that changed. It did become a 7-day-a-week business, which is not attractive to people, of course. However, I thought that it would be still attractive, particularly to a family because I was operating with, at that stage, with really just one staff member on at any one time, plus
so you were working an awful lot of hours at that stage?
I was backing up. I had somebody who opened the business in the morning with the papers, so they were open by 7 o'clock because a lot of the papers have to go out to the farms, and they go out with the postman. And then so there was he would work through till midday, and I'd have another person come on at midday and work to the end of the day. So it was operating basically with one person, with myself doing the ordering and the bookwork, and sometimes filling in when someone wasn't able to be there or change the hours or something. So, yes, that was a lot of hours for me initially because, as I mentioned earlier, I was on a learning curve too, and I had to re-establish credibility with the wholesalers and so on because there wasn't any, and some of them had been burnt by the other people by not having had their bills paid. So I had to re-establish quite a lot of
yes, it's
credibility
almost
with people.
Catch-up exit planning, isn't it?
Oh, what?
Just to get it back to basics. Yeah.
It wasn't easy because there was a bit of a smell still hanging around the place because of some people having been burnt. Yeah. So there was a bit of, had to recover from that too. But we did, and quite quickly. So that wasn't, we overcame that. But another thing, I had rather hoped that maybe one of the staff members would have taken on the business. There was two different staff members who would have liked to, I think. They weren't, one of them just wasn't in a financial position to be able to do it, and health conditions may not have been able to do the hours I was doing. And the other ones, the partner wasn't interested. So, and they loved the store. Both of them loved it. It was just disappointing to me that neither of them sort of carried through with it because they were ideal people and they'd been with me for 4 years, as it turned out, both of them. They were long-term as they started with me. They saw the business grow. They would have been ideal to continue on, but it wasn't to be.
Yeah, look, it's a tricky one because they know the business well, but just then you've got to step up to taking the risks that go with ownership and finance it. So
that's right.
It's definitely happening more, and particularly I've seen it in regional areas, probably across the board actually, that staff in the face of employment uncertainty across the board, I think generally more employees are looking to secure their future by becoming an employer or an owner. But as you say, it's a big step up.
It is. It is.
The process for you of selling the business on top of running the business, how did that go? Did it absorb more time than you thought, more energy than you thought?
No, I don't know that selling it was such a big, it didn't take a lot of time. The shop itself takes a lot of time. Because I was advertising the way it was, I just, dealt with the people as they came forward and wanted to know more about it and so on. But, it didn't really.
It was a bit of a wait between inquiries, was it? So you could have a.
And yes, it was after the initial flush.
Yeah.
As I say, whether they were genuine inquiries or a lot of CB ones. But after that, I suppose after the first sort of 4 or 5 months, it settled down, and then nothing much happened really from then on.
So you just kept an eye on the business and figured that if you kept the business trading along nicely, that a buyer would eventually pop up. Was that your?
Yeah, well, the business kept growing. It just continued to grow each year. Actually, it became more popular. It became known. Tourists would come in as well. They knew that we were stocking a lot of local produce, which they were really loved, and we increased that as much as we could too. So that was always an attraction, and people always came into the general store. They'd come back year after year. When they're down the prom, they'd come and do their shopping there and so on. So that it started to develop a reputation for having interesting and different things.
Yep.
Yeah, different things. And I also spent a lot of time looking for those different things and more interesting products, not just what you're going to get at the IGA or the supermarket, but different products of European type things, and of course a lot of the local products.
The sort of stuff people would, drive that little bit extra to find on their way to the prom, or, that's it's a charming place, and it really did have a beautiful range of great produce. Quite a lot. I think I put more of my energies into maintaining that interest and thinking that would attract people more so than Did you have inquiries from people who happened to be visiting and go, this is a lovely business?
All the time. Every weekend they come in, I love the store. People that say, that's really much, because we have the old worldy sort of feel about it too, and they just warmed to that. It had a warm wraparound type feel about the store, and people just like shopping in it. It was cosy, and it was a hub for the locals. Sometimes I'd have 3 or 4 of them meeting in there in the morning, just chatting away and forgetting to go home after a while. So I have to put a couch in here soon.
Nice thing about a local business, yeah.
Yes, it was nice. It was a nice place to work. It was a charming place to work, really. But it was the long hours.
Yep. But so it's sold, and now you're proud of your work. The business has thrived. It remains a central part of the commercial infrastructure in Fish Creek, and so there's been more talk even in the last couple of months about this idea of moving out of Melbourne. So you did it. Is that a positive thing to do for people that are thinking about, finally it's time to get out of Melbourne or Sydney or wherever?
Extremely positive. Couldn't be better.
Right.
Absolutely.
What are the big upsides of the change?
Oh, where would I start with that? It's friendlier. It's fresher. It's good for the soul. It's just got so much going for it. It's you watch the news now and you see all the horrific things happening in Melbourne. You think, thank God I moved out of there. It's just different. You know your neighbours. You know the people down the streets. You can have a chat to people. It's just so different. As I said, I lived in Melbourne for a long time, and the last 20-odd years where I was, I would have perhaps only known 2 people in the street, which is ridiculous. And sometimes, your neighbours not even particularly friendly, or they're just different. It's different. It's different. When you go to work every day anyway, when you come home, you don't really see them the same way, I suppose. But even in the country, people they care for you. They're aware of you. It's just I wouldn't change it for quids.
Great. So you're a fan of that. In terms
Absolutely.
of encouraging others to buy a small business, I'd really just like to spend a few last minutes on. You've had a very deep, rich business background, but to take the leap and buy a small business in a regional, or for that matter in a metro location, what advice would you be giving to people considering buying a small business for the first time?
Well, I think firstly is make sure you're buying it at the right price, of course, and have some financial backing to assist you. Make sure you're going to be able to, depending on the business, obviously, make sure you're going to be able to continue it on and put something into it for a few months at least while you're being while you're getting up to speed. If you need to, if you're learning a new business, like I had to learn I didn't know nothing about stacking grocery shelves or what groceries even to have. And that's the other important thing, is to understand your market. You've got to understand your market. I think that's the important thing too. If you research it, know what the locals are wanting. It's all very well to get something into the store or whatever, but they're not the least bit interested in it.
If you're the owner of that business, and it sounds like you carefully thought about and curated what you put in for both locals and for tourists, so that probably
that's right.
made the business more sellable, more viable.
Yes, I think you've got to have both. You've got to just make sure you know your market, as I say, and as you just said, because I also catered to the interests of the tourist market as well as the locals. And the locals are not necessarily going to buy the things I bought for the tourists because, a lot of the locals around here, they have their own chooks, they've got their own meat, they've got a lot of things that I'd be selling that would be of interest to the tourists. Yeah. But you've got to have both. So I think it's important that you understand your market and you cater to the market. No good having fancy ideas about different products, but no one local needs it or wants it. That's I suppose the other thing is your staff. Your staff are essential. They're the cogs in the wheel. You've got to make sure you select the right people, look after them, respect them. If they're not the right ones and occasionally you get a snag, get rid of them because they can destroy your business in a flash. You've got to have the right personality for whatever it is you're doing. It's no good having someone in a store like I had who's an introvert. No good. You've got to be happy and bright and greeting and warm and, that's what people want. But you also need to know when to back off if someone doesn't really want that.
Yeah. But it sounds like also they can destroy a business, but in your case, they were very helpful in terms of transitioning the business to a new owner because they were...
Oh, yes, the ones I had there. Look, I've had a couple of snags there too. And thankfully, I was in a position to get rid of them. But it sounds awful, doesn't it? I don't mean it like that. But, the reality is some people are not suited for that type of business. It's nothing about that. It's just they're perhaps not the right people. And I think that they can do more harm than good. And they've all got to get on well together too. It's no good if you don't want a nasty feel amongst your staff because if you have, it's going to be noticeable by your customers.
Yeah. So investing in staff, it's great to help run the business better, but also potentially to sell it. If you look after, if you've got security of in your lease or your retail premises, if it's that kind of business, that's a key one. Is there anything else that you would, for a prospective seller in a regional area, is there anything else that you would focus on? And lastly, how long would you advise them to start to think about the exit planning process before they want to sell?
Oh, if they're wanting to sell the business, just going in and selling?
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't quite understand what you're asking me, Michael.
Sorry, I'll go back and I'll say that other than staff and your premises, is there any other really major things you've got to get right as part of exit planning?
Exit planning. Well, I don't know. The staff. Yes. I suppose just had to have some records there if people want to look at them. It's interesting that none of the people were particularly interested in looking at any of my records, even though I had them. No, they weren't. They just that's what I mean by I think they were rather naive about getting into a business and perhaps had their own ideas of what they were going to do rather than keep going with a successful business. I don't quite know. But
it's really odd. I mean, when you're financially involved in a business, you'd almost think that's the first thing that would be.
You would.
But so and lastly, the second part of that question was if you're an owner out in the regions, rural area of Victoria or New South Wales, wherever, how long would you advise them to they're going to need to sell the business?
And through my experience, as soon as possible. I thought, I said to myself, as soon as this is viable, it's going on the market, and that's what I did. And it still took me that long to sell, which was very disappointing to me. But
so 3.5 years, and maybe a couple of years too long. Ideally,
absolutely too long. Yeah, Sorry?
You were imagining 12, 18 months to do it?
Oh, look, I'd hoped it would go in 6 months,
right.
But, that's me being naive, I suppose, coming from the city and thinking, it's up and going, it's an attractive little business, it's suited family, the school's across the way there, and you've just be perfect not to sort of get snapped up. Silly me because it didn't. And I was there for a long time and I've noticed other businesses all around in the neighbouring town and in our own town that have been on the market that take a long time to sell. So it must be a rural thing, I think.
I think this is not the pool of buyers, even if it's a pretty strong business.
Well, I think that's about, you've hit the nail on the head. You just don't have the population down here, the movement, and even some of the people who come through, the tourists, and I must have been told 100 times that they'd love to buy the business. Isn't it lovely? La, la, la. But they haven't, they're not going to sell up where they are and move.
No, it's a massive move. And at any stage of your life, it's, to whether you've got kids at school or teenagers at uni
that's right.
Yeah. Look, Carolyn, that's been a really great insight from an owner who's been through, a 3.5-year sale process after running the business for 2.5. So I'm hoping that owners listening in will, I think, take from this conversation that whatever you're thinking about how quickly you can get out of the business, you're wrong. You're more than likely wrong. You're going to just need to allow a lot more time and to be patient to do those key things, keep your staff engaged and, make sure the business is viable, but just allow more time, I think, is the key message. Would you agree?
Yes, and keep it interesting. Don't drop your bundle about it and let it slip a bit because you're disappointed and that you're getting tired. All of those things start to show. I think it's really important to keep it right up there and keep the improvements going. It keeps looking more attractive to people. Eventually, the right one will come along.
Eventually, yeah, that's what we aim for. Look, Carolyn, thank you again for your time today. Really appreciate that. And I hope the owners listening in have taken away some really good tips. Thank you.
Good. Thanks, Michael.
So that was episode 3 of the Owner to Owner podcast, a really open and insightful, honest chat with Carolyn Fryer. She has a long history and track record in successfully owning, running and selling businesses. Our discussion contains some excellent advice for both owners, but also for towns and communities where their small businesses are critical parts of the local commercial infrastructure and where they underpin really the availability of day-to-day essentials. They provide employment and vibrancy and tourism to the town. But for owners, I thought there were a couple of key takeaways that I wanted to go through. Firstly, she had a plan that was twofold. It's always great to have a plan. Firstly, she's going to turn the business around and then sell it. She delivered the first part of the plan on time, a couple of years to turn it around. And I suspect that was because of her proven capacity and her ability to run businesses, but also because she could actually directly influence and control what she needed to deliver. She planned the second part, that is the exit or the sale, but that took way longer than she thought. It ended up being about 3.5 years and, initially she thought 6 months. While she even admitted perhaps a little bit of naivety in thinking that the business would sell in 6 months, the bottom line was it took her 3.5 years, and it proves that the selling process is a lot harder to directly control. Buyers are there, but they can take their sweet old time in finding you when you want to sell. So the message is, her message is to start exit planning in the sale process as soon as you possibly can. And if you're thinking it's going to take 6 months, you're wrong. The second one was, even though the selling process took a lot longer than she wanted, she realized it was critical to keep the business fresh, keep her energy up, keep the staff energy up, so that while the sale process was going on, the business still looked vibrant and alive. She thought if that didn't happen, there was going to be a slippery slope and the business would suffer, and in turn customers wouldn't be happy, and then the prospects for sale would just, would reduce. I think the last one, in fact, not the last one, to run a successful business that you can sell, it's really straightforward. You need to keep good staff and you need to get rid of the snags, as she called them, because they'll hold the business back and possibly even derail the sale. Finally, while you're running your business and also getting it ready for sale, use a business mentor. Carolyn had extensive and very broad business experience, but she stepped into a business that she hadn't been involved with before and had the good sense to seek out a mentor who did have experience. So someone with that background still chose to find and use a mentor. So for local towns and communities who rely so heavily on small businesses, there are also a couple of really key messages. First one, how can the town and the people in the town support the small businesses and their owners on an ongoing basis, but also at a time when it's time for those owners to move on? What can the town people do? What can the other small business operators do? And lastly, Carolyn was an alumni of the town. And by that, I mean she grew up in Fish Creek. She was very connected to the place. So when significant things happen in a town, I'm encouraging those people in town to think about who grew up in the town and who remains connected with the town, to seek out and connect with their alumni. Coming up in the next 2 episodes in this Small Business Banter series, I talk with Sandra Kane from beautiful Coles Bay in Tasmania. Sandra successfully operated her 3 businesses for around 25 years. I worked closely with her for over 3 years to sell those businesses. We got there in the end, and Sandra is now happily investing her time in other personal interests, including raising some livestock, her beloved belted Galloways. But as is the case with many regional business owners, the sale process was a lot longer than she had thought possible and had hoped for. This common experience of lengthy selling processes for regional small businesses is the pure motivation for this series. Over the next 2 episodes, and in the spirit of open sharing, Sandra and I chat about her experiences in selling, what she would do differently, and what she would recommend other owners do. See you next week. So that is all for today's episode of Small Business Banter. I continue to be inspired, bringing you small business experts and other small business owners and hearing their stories. If you want to listen to any past episode, jump onto your podcast platform of choice and search Small Business Banter. There you will find a diverse and fascinating collection of small business owners and experts openly discussing and sharing their experiences. For any of the links, resources, or information we've talked about on the show today, or to contact me, please head over to smallbusinessbanter.com, or you can find us on Facebook and Instagram. And it would be great to have you tune in the same time next week for another episode of Small Business Banter.